When my husband and I bought our first home, we were informed that there was an unfinished basement. That never bothered me. Well, until one night. My husband had been called into work unexpectedly and texted me he'd be probably home around after midnight. I was home alone with our golden retriever Murphy. Around 9 p.m., my phone suddenly screamed with an emergency alert. It wasn't a weather warning. It said an escaped convicted violent offender had been seen in our area and instructed residents to lock all their doors and windows immediately and call 911 if they saw anything suspicious. I checked every door and every window to make sure everything was locked. After that, I sat down on the couch and turned on the TV and tried to forget about it. My dog, though, had other ideas. About 15 minutes later, he stood up, ears stiff, staring toward the hallway. He started barking. Not his usual bark when squirrels ran across the yard. This was deeper. He wouldn't stop. "No, hush," I told him. But he ignored me. Instead, he slowly walked toward the basement door and planted himself right in front of it, growling, a slow, steady growl I'd never heard from him before. My stomach dropped. I walked over and stared at the basement door. It was closed. Nothing looked unusual. I was trying to convince myself that I was overreacting because of the alert. I slowly turned the doorknob and opened the door. Darkness. The basement light was off. I couldn't see much beyond the first few steps. I called out, "Hello?" Nothing. Not a sound. Every instinct told me not to go downstairs. So I closed the door, picked up Murphy by his collar, and brought him back into the living room. Eventually, he settled down beside me. I almost convinced myself everything was fine. Until about 20 minutes later, I heard it. A long, slow creak. I muted the television. The sound came again. I turned toward the hallway. The basement door. It was slowly opening by itself. Just a few inches, then a little farther. But no one came out. The hallway stayed dark. I didn't want to see what happened next. I knew there wasn't anybody else in the house. I grabbed Murphy by the collar and backed away quietly as I could and hurried upstairs. Once inside our bedroom, I locked the door and shoved my dresser against it. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone while calling 911. "Hello? Yes, I think someone's in my house," I whispered. The dispatcher told me to stay exactly where I was. Then, I heard footsteps downstairs. Slow, deliberate, walking through my living room. Then, they stopped, right outside my bedroom. The doorknob moved. Again and again. Murphy erupted into furious barking. Whoever was outside the door didn't want to try to force it open. Instead, everything went silent. Those next few minutes felt longer than anything I've ever felt, followed by crashing and someone yelling, then handcuffs clicking. An officer knocked on my bedroom door and identified himself before telling me it was safe to come out. They found the escaped convict hiding behind my bedroom door, waiting for me to come out. He was gripping one of my own kitchen knives and waiting silently for me to leave the room. Investigators later determined he'd gotten in through an old basement window whose latch didn't fully engage when I tried to lock it earlier. The emergency alert had probably saved my life by making me check the house and stay alert. The man was arrested without anyone being hurt and returned to prison. My husband came home after that. Neither of us slept that night. Within the week, we had security cameras installed, reinforced deadbolts on every exterior door, and replaced every basement window lock. Nothing like that has ever happened to us again. But even now, whenever I hear an emergency alert on my phone, I can't help but look toward the basement door. I was 10 years old when I got the flu so badly that my parents let me stay home from school. My dad had an emergency at work and my mom had to leave with him because we only had one car that day. Before they left, my mom tucked me into bed upstairs and said she'd be back as soon as she could. "Keep your phone next to you," she said, "and don't open the door for anyone." I nodded, half asleep. I never heard them leave. About an hour later, I woke up to the sound of a cabinet door opening downstairs. I smiled. I figured my parents had came home. I even called out, "Mom?" But there was no answer. Just another cabinet slamming shut. Then the silverware rattling. I got out of bed and slowly walked to the top of the stairs. From where I stood, I could see in the part of the kitchen. A man I've never seen before was digging through our cupboards. He was filthy. His clothes looked like they hadn't been washed in months. His hair was matted, and he kept talking to himself while stuffing boxes of crackers and cans of soup into his old backpack. He'd stop every few seconds and whisper things I couldn't understand before laughing to himself. I stood there frozen. Then he suddenly stopped moving. Without turning around, he quietly said, "I know someone's there." My heart dropped. I backed away to the stairs slowly as I could. When I reached my bedroom, I shut the door and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly. I grabbed my phone and called 911. I whispered to the operator that there was a stranger inside my home. She told me to stay hidden and not make a sound. Then, I heard footsteps, slow and heavy, coming up the stairs. They stopped right outside my bedroom. The doorknob turned. Once. They were trying to come in. I held my breath so hard my chest hurt. The operator kept whispering, "Stay quiet. The officers are almost there." The man stood outside my bedroom door, and then I heard him laugh. Just enough for me to hear it through the door. His footsteps slowly moved away. A few seconds later, the front door slammed shut. The house went completely silent. Then the police arrived. They searched every room, but the man was gone. But they found muddy footprints leading through the kitchen. The pantry had been emptied onto the floor, and food was missing. One officer asked my parents if they remembered to lock the front door. My mom looked at my dad. Neither of them answered right away. Finally, my dad quietly admitted that in the rush to leave, he had forgotten to lock it. The officers believed the man had simply wandered in to look for food. They searched the neighborhood for hours, but never found him. We installed new locks, security cameras, and an alarm system a few days later. Nothing like that ever happened to us again, though. I'm an adult now, but I still check the front door every night before I go to bed. When I was 22, I made extra money by babysitting for families in my neighborhood. One Friday night, a couple I babysat for several times asked me if I would watch their 6-year-old daughter while they went out for their anniversary. She was an easy kid. By 8, she'd brush her teeth, listen to bedtime story, and then go to sleep. I figured it would be one of the easiest nights I've had. After cleaning the kitchen, I stepped out onto the patio overlooking their pool. It was a warm summer night, so I cracked open a beer and called my friend to pass the time. About 20 minutes later into our conversation, I heard the sliding door open behind me. It was Emma. She was crying. "There's a man in my room." I laughed a little at first, thinking she had a nightmare. "What did he look like?" "I don't know. He was standing by my closet." I walked upstairs with her anyways. I checked under her bed, behind the curtains, inside the closet, and nothing. The bedroom window was shut and locked. I smiled and told her I think she just had a bad dream. Within a few minutes, she calmed down enough and fell back to sleep. After that, I went back outside. About another 10 minutes later, I heard the patio door open again. Emma was standing there. This time she wasn't crying. She looked terrified. Her face had gone completely pale. He came back. I sighed, thinking she still was frightened from the nightmare. "Did you see him again?" She nodded. Something about the way that she said those two words made me uneasy. I followed her upstairs again. This time, before I even reached her bedroom, I noticed something was different. A cool breeze drifted into the hallway. The bedroom window was cracked open. I knew it hadn't been that way before. I had checked it myself. At that moment, every hair on my arm stood up. I slowly stepped inside. The room was quiet. Too quiet. I looked toward the window, but there was nothing. Under the bed, nothing. Then I noticed the closet door. The first time I checked it out, I'd left it wide open. Now it was only open a few inches. I slowly reached out and pulled it open. At first, I didn't see anything. Then my eyes adjusted to the darkness. Someone was standing in the back corner of the closet, perfectly still. I could only see one eye, staring through the hanging clothes directly at me. Neither of us moved, for what felt like forever. Then the eye blinked. Without saying a word, I ran and grabbed Emma. The man suddenly lunged forward, shoving clothes aside and stepping out of the closet. I didn't wait to see what he looked like. I ran. Emma was crying into my shoulder as I carried her downstairs 2 steps at a time. Behind us, I heard the footsteps crossing the bedroom floor. I slammed the front door behind us and sprinted to the neighbor's house. They let us in immediately and called 911. Within minutes, police surrounded the home. They searched every room, but the intruder was gone. Near the living room, officers discovered one of the front windows hadn't been fully latched. They believed that the man had quietly forced it open after thinking nobody was home. The parents came home as soon as they got the call. Emma ran straight into her mother's arms. The detectives told us that we had done the right thing by leaving immediately instead of confronting whoever was hiding upstairs. Unfortunately, though, the man was never identified, and I never babysat in that house again. Years later, I can still picture that dark closet. Not because I remember the man's face. I never really saw it. What I remember is realizing that Emma hadn't imagined anything. The first time she came downstairs, someone had really been standing in her room. I just didn't look in the right places.